One key reason for ETH's underperformance in recent quarters is just simply capital outflows from the Ethereum ecosystem to alternative layer ones like Solana and Sui, who are attracting users with superior speed, cheaper costs, and wider accessibility to retail.
We all want to believe in something. In Chinese, belief also means trust. We want to trust our systems and each other so we can build a future beyond what we know. Join us at Consensus Hong Kong, where belief becomes real.
Hello and welcome to Markets Daily, hosted by me, Jen Sanasi. On this show, we navigate the currents shaping the crypto markets, providing insights against the broader financial landscape. So whether you're actively trading or simply fascinated in the volatility that is the crypto markets, this show is your compass to understanding what's happened, where we are, and where we're going. Joining me on today's show is Head of Digital Asset Research at VanEck, Matthew Sigel. Matthew, how are you?
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thanks for being here. I like to start off by asking this question of all my guests. What have you been watching recently?
I guess we've been watching the persistent resilience of Bitcoin dominance. It's common during the bull market phase to have many drawdowns for Bitcoin in the 10% range, and that's more or less where we've been hanging out since BTC hit that all-time high right before the inauguration. But really the altcoins, Ethereum, and especially if we look at our equal weighted basket of the top 100 coins, has been really disappointing. This is the biggest post-election drawdown that has ever occurred subsequent to an election. And it seems like there's a lot of frustration with the kind of tokenomics and inflation rates of many of kind of the 2024 vintage of altcoins. So I guess the biggest question that we're getting and trying to ask ourselves as well is what will catalyze a resumption in kind of altcoin outperformance.
Well, I'm going to ask that question right back to you. What have you found as you explore this?
A couple things. One is just that you want to be buying low and selling high. So with our like equal weighted altcoin basket down 35% or so from the peak, it's probably a better time to look for longs than to try to sell things at the bottom. We've also noticed that like last year's L2s, very crowded a bunch of Ethereum L2s that came to market, generally with low floats and high fully discounted valuations. And nearly all those L2s have underperformed Ethereum. And Ethereum performance itself is somewhat disappointing. So we've noticed that token issuers are taking that feedback into account. And I know that the AI coins have drawn down a lot, but if you look at kind of the supply demand dynamics of some of those newer coin launches, they seem to be more balanced in terms of what's the future supply. So we're hopeful and optimistic that kind of the 2025 vintage of coins will have less of that dynamic going forward.
That's really interesting. You mentioned Ether there, the Ethereum ecosystem. Previously, Ether and Bitcoin really kind of traded in lockstep. It really feels like that is not the narrative anymore. What are you looking at when it comes to the Ethereum ecosystem, and how do you see Ether performing over the next few months?
Yeah, one key reason for ETH's underperformance in recent quarters is just simply capital outflows from the Ethereum ecosystem to alternative layer ones like Solana and Sui, who are attracting users with superior speed, cheaper costs, and wider accessibility to retail. Now, Ethereum core developers are trying to stay competitive. There's a major upgrade slated for March called the Pectra fork, which should improve Ethereum's user experience and perhaps stem some of these market share losses. Historically, Ethereum forks have been more of a sell the news, but given that expectations are so low, we're optimistic that maybe some of the better functionality that's coming around account abstraction, specifically making it easier to automate payments using Ethereum wallets, will drive some more interest in ETH. I think the other thing that ETH has in its favor is wide acceptance from traditional finance ecosystem. So for fund managers who are tokenizing, various TradFi instruments, nobody is ignoring ETH, right? They may be
Mhm.
adding Solana onto the list of chains that they will support, but nobody is abandoning Ethereum. Meanwhile, the regulatory backdrop is improving. We are expecting the SEC to approve the in-kind creation and redemption of Ethereum ETFs, which would make them more liquid, less capital intensive for the intermediaries who facilitate ETF creations and redemptions. Also, staking could be added to the Ethereum ETFs, likely before the end of the year. And as we talk to our more typical clients, the banks and brokers, the wirehouses on Wall Street who distribute fund manager products, we don't feel like they've lost confidence or conviction in Ethereum. On the contrary, they're kind of just heading up the learning curve. So if there is a institutional adoption of open source digital assets, I think Ethereum is going to be part of that.
That's interesting. And I say that because under the current administration, I can only imagine that we're going to see more layer ones pop up. We're going to see more layer twos pop up on top of these layer ones. And so, given that, do you think that Ether can regain the momentum that it once had? Or will it be something that is used, possibly adopted by institutions, but it is going to have a lot more competition that might not let it get back to that um, place where it once was.
I think a lot of it is just going to be driven by the overall tape.
Hmm.
If Bitcoin is working, and I mean, you need a certain amount of Bitcoin profits before market participants will recycle that
Yeah.
into kind of riskier coins like ETH, Solana, and the long tail of alts. I would be very surprised if ETH doesn't at least keep pace once the bull market resumes. Every cycle, there's a lot of competitors, like the top 10 coins, as you know, tends to, aside from Bitcoin, turn over every cycle. Ethereum's still hanging out there in number 2 position. So
Hmm.
my bias is still that flows will return to it once the bull market resumes. If that's not the case, we'll have to revisit the thesis.
Matthew, when is the bull market going to resume? And not everyone loves to answer this question, but I gotta ask it. Where do you see the price of Bitcoin and ETH heading once the bull market does resume?
Yeah, Bitcoin's pretty much been trading in lockstep with the odds of a strategic Bitcoin reserve being enacted. And there's still a path to that happening at the federal level. There's 2 paths, actually. There's the executive branch simply decreeing that a strategic stockpile exists and directing the Treasury to buy some through the Exchange Stabilization Fund, or just holding on to the coins that have already been seized. There's the legislative approach that Cynthia Lummis has mooted, and you can expect more news on that next month. There'll be events in Washington, D.C. to educate lawmakers and try to build momentum for that. But we shouldn't forget what's happening at the state level. we're tracking 20 different pieces of legislation that cumulative could account for more than $20 billion of flows into Bitcoin. Now, we don't think all of them will happen, but we do think at least one will occur this year. And I just got back from Dubai, and judging from my conversations over there, the rest of the world is going to really take notice once there is government buying of Bitcoin. So that would be one thing that would definitely, I think, catalyze the next leg of the bull market. But I think it's just important to see like where we are. Altcoins down 35%, Bitcoin volatility. The last time it was this low, there was a large rally. It was November 2023. The last time BTC volatility was this low on a short-term basis, that was the beginning of a bull market. Funding rates in many cases are back down to essentially 0% or negative for many alts. So the setup is positive if we just get a whiff of good news. The SBR would be one thing that would be good news, but then I think you also just have, judging by our phone calls from financial advisors who are still stuck at zero on their Bitcoin allocation, those types of flows, I think as we get into deeper in Q1 and Q2, will become more steady.
I had an analyst on the show recently who talked a little bit about the crypto IPOs that we're expecting and the incentive that companies looking to IPO might have to prop up the price of Bitcoin. Curious on your thoughts there. How do you think the potential for more crypto IPOs might affect the markets?
Yeah, you're going to see us be more active in the equity part of this ecosystem over the course of 2025. We filed for an actively managed ETF that would buy equities exposed to digital assets, and the list of potential IPOs is pretty long. You've got Circle, Gemini, Kraken, Bullish, Ripple, Figure, Chainalysis. These are all names that have been rumored to try to go public this year, and it takes two to tango here. It's not just the issuer. You need to have banks that are willing to underwrite these IPOs, and have seen recent news that both Bank of America and Citigroup, bulge bracket investment banks, have been hiring investment bankers and pitching to win these IPOs. I think that's an important element to bringing more market cap to the space. The other thing that's happening is the SEC is providing a slightly easier path towards uplisting from the pink sheets to the big board, or moving from the Canadian exchange onto the NYSE. We've seen a number of stocks, kind of small caps, that have performed very, very well as they achieved that uplisting. There's some bigger companies yet to come. Galaxy is one that's out there that a lot of people are watching. If they're able to get a NASDAQ listing, that would probably drive a lot of institutional interest to the space. So, fingers crossed. I think if Bitcoin can just kind of hang out at this 100K level, then we could get maybe half of those IPOs this year.
Matthew, thanks so much for joining Markets Daily today.
Thanks, Jen.
And just a disclosure, you mentioned that Bullish might be looking to go public. Bullish is the parent company of CoinDesk. All right. Thank you to our audience who watched today's episode of Markets Daily. If you don't already do it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up. If you prefer to listen to this show, we are on the CoinDesk Podcast Network. That is available on all podcast platforms. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.